Hello and welcome to WYTV7. I am Byron Pettit, the host of Family Matters. Family Matters airs every Thursday at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I hope you will tune into weekly to support my show. Family Matters discusses real issues and challenges that individuals and families are going through in real time. The mission of WYTV7 is to educate, empower, and encourage. My hope is that weekly when you tune in, that you will be called to action after watching each one of these shows. So today we are having part 2 of a topic that we discussed, was called Dealing with the Grief of the Death of a Child. We're fortunate to have Pastor Ruett Foster back. Ruett Foster is a survivor of gun violence. Mr. Foster, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Mr. Foster, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you were impacted by gun violence.
You know, I wanted to first start out by sharing a little thing about today. Today is a very significant day for me, and it just shows me just how much God is powerful, how much God loves us, and how much God is alive. Today marks the 4th anniversary of the passing of my father-in-law, who went home to be with the Lord, Dr. Warren L. Bennett. And today also marks the 3rd anniversary of my birth father, Ruett Foster. He transitioned on this day also 3 years ago. They both transitioned on the same day, a year apart. They both had a great love and friendship for one another. When we went to the hospital as my dad was transitioning, they told us that Dr. Bennett had come to care for him. No one on staff knew of a Dr. Bennett, but Dr. Bennett was the last doctor that cared for my dad as he transitioned. So we know that we are spirits and we worship God, who is the ultimate spirit. And I just really wanted to share the significance of that because family matters.
Yeah, thank you for that. I knew Dr. Bennett, but I had a close relationship with your father, Mr. Foster. So, wow, what a significance. God does not do anything by mistake. This is by design that we are able to be together again. Absolutely. And for the anniversary of 2 significant men in your life. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. It occurred to me this morning, like, wow, this is the 27th. This is the day.
Yes,
So
yes.
So you want me, go ahead.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you were impacted for gun violence. As we know, this is part 2. So some of those who may not have seen part 1, I encourage you to go back and listen to the broadcast in part 1. But bring us up to speed in part 2 for those who don't know your story.
Okay. Well, my family is a picture of my wife, Rhonda, my son, Evan, who was 7 at the time, and my son, Alec, who was 10 months old at the time, who's now soon to be 25 in about a week. We're a loving, God-fearing family, seeking to live the life that God gave us to live out our purpose. And my wife had taken both sons, but she had taken Evan, who was 7, to Darby Park in Inglewood to pick up his soccer trophy and to sign him up for the intramural sports for basketball the season coming. The coach wasn't there, but as she went back to the car, she was talking to my son, and she noticed that there were these guys who got out of a vehicle, who had approached another guy who was actually in a red vehicle. These guys were Crips, which their color is blue. The guy was in a red vehicle, which is the color of the Bloods, who was their rival gang. He had nothing to do with the gang, but they approached him and asked him, I'm sure probably what set he's from or what have you. He ran beyond our vehicle. And the one who actually did the shooting, Charles Baker, he had a Mac 90 assault weapon. He had a Mac 90 assault weapon, and he fired off 75 rounds. 3 of the rounds fatally wounded Evan. Evan's life was taken from us. We became instant activists. I was a part of a march the silent march that was speaking in behalf of those who had lost their lives to gun violence. We got involved. My wife and I got involved in activism. We began to go into the prisons. We began to go into the youth prisons and deal with the young men and the young women about their lives and help them toward true conversion. Let them know that there's a God that loves them and that their purpose is greater than what they've probably ever known to this point. So our son was taken from us. Our beautiful Evan was taken from us, and it totally turned our lives upside down. But oh, for the grace of God, for the love of God, God held us up. Yeah, and I remember when I got the phone call, I was assistant pastor. I'm a senior pastor now. I was assistant pastor at a church in Inglewood, and I was leading prayer that evening, and I was told there was a shooting that involved your family. You need to come to Darby Park. And so probably the longest drive of my life, I went to the park. I went to the hospital, and I got to the park. Then I had to wait there for the officer in charge. Once he arrived, he came over to me, seemed like a somewhat broken guy, somewhat a little emotional actually. But I learned later that he was this very tough cop. But what he had seen and what had happened to my family and Evan's life being taken, it touched his heart. It broke him. And he asked me, he said, so once he got the words together, he said, so your wife and your son are going to be fine. And they've gone to the hospital. And I said, I have two sons. And he said, well, how old was your oldest son? He didn't make it. And like I said, life changed from that point forward. I was driven to the hospital by a chaplain who I had met a year before, hadn't seen him since then. And he saw me and remembered me. We were at a prayer breakfast and he broke down. He's like, oh my gosh, this is the son you were talking about at the breakfast. So God brought our lives together and we became the best of friends. But it was a devastating thing. It was the toughest, most egregious thing that could ever have happened to me. I believe anyone. Your children should outlive you.
Yeah.
And
let me ask a question, because I think I know you and I have talked obviously quite a bit about what had happened to the family, but I imagine some of the listeners are wondering, with your faith, you being a pastor, did you have anger toward God when this happened, obviously? And how did that obviously impact you? And how did you feel about having anger toward God if you did?
And this is the honest truth. And some people probably still don't believe it today. But I didn't really have anger toward God. God was my source. God was my all in all. We were living lives honoring him and worshiping him. And this happened. God allowed this to happen for a greater purpose. God didn't do it, but he allowed it for a greater purpose. He entrusted us with so great a sorrow, and we deal with it. We still deal with it every day. But I wasn't angry at him. I did learn after a number of years, though, that I was impacted by what happened. And God dealt with me one day and basically said in so many words, as spirit to spirit, as I relate to my father in my devotional time and what have you, and talk to him and seek him for wisdom and guidance, I heard in my spirit that you were angry, but you kept your cool. You were angry though, and it's okay to be angry at me. It's okay. And as I began to look at my behavior and things maybe I did and maybe things I didn't do, I was like, oh Lord, I guess there was a level of anger that I didn't understand to be anger, because my love and my allegiance to you has always just been spot on. But God's like, I'm a big God. I can handle everything. I know everything. I'm all powerful. I'm ever present. I'm all knowing. So just give your all to me truthfully. Cry out to me. Surrender yourself to me. Cast all your cares upon me, for I care for you.
Mhm, mhm. How did you, because each person obviously dealt or is dealing with the loss of Evan Steele, but how did you help Rhonda get through it? Did she ever express anger towards you? As far as what happened, not you, the person was like, I'm angry at God specifically. Did she ever express that to you at all?
Yes, in so many words, yeah, there was definite anger. Um, I think when these sorts of things happen, there's anger everywhere. I mean, it just depletes your energy, your momentum. Everything is thrown off. And Rhonda had said, she said to the Lord, well, I'm going to trust you. You're going to have to hold me up. You're going to have to show me. But we all went through levels of anger and frustration, because the most terrible thing had happened to us. Our precious son, who was full of life, full of love, was taken from us by an angry gang member who was seeking to retaliate against another gang and didn't even accomplish the task.
Mm-hmm.
So I charged him at his sentencing not to let having killed my son be in vain. Turn your life around, make a difference even behind the prison gates. And to this day, he hasn't truly lived up to it.
Mm-hmm. You know what? I was always wondering, now that Alex, a young man, and this experience him happened, he was 10 months old, what sort of emotion, or I'm assuming it was no anger that he felt. I'm assuming it was more of a loss or maybe a lot of why. Did he come to you in regards to like, Dad, I don't, maybe what, I don't even know what to feel. What has he expressed to you along this journey as well?
Well, Alec was 10 months old.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
see him in his hospital scrubs and a goggle on his eye. He had had eye surgery. He had to have a cornea transplant because metal shrapnel had gone into his left eye. And but he was still full of life, full of love, because he was a baby. He didn't know any better, and this should not have happened to an innocent child. Should not have happened to anyone. Alec was kind of silent for a good bit of the time. I mean, he was so much younger, and we actually did a good job, I think a real responsible job of shielding him from all of the gun violence. We were doing restorative justice work, violence prevention work, gang intervention work, and we shielded him until he reached a certain age, and then we allowed him to actually speak out. Around age 10, he actually spoke out at a Women Against Gun Violence fundraiser. It was an amazing time. But he didn't have very many, and we were interviewed, a family interview, maybe about 3 years back. And at that time, Alex spoke about the fact that he didn't really have memories of Evan. He didn't remember him. He was so young, but what memories he did gather were the ones that we gave him, as we told about Evan's life and kept Evan alive so he would know his brother. And he's become his own level of an activist now, just on his own volition, on his own doing.
Yeah, and I think that's important for the viewers to hear, is that the stories about his big brother was told through you, which also speaks to the relationship and how you were molding and forming Evan. So that's important. Sometimes if I don't have, that picture right there speaks to it all. That picture right there. So I can only imagine what you must have shared with Alec in regards to how and who his big brother was. What I want to do before we go to break, there is a letter that you had read last time we were together. And the very first bullet point talked about where it said if he were president, number one is I'd want to marry a woman that worked for Mary Kay, like Rhonda did. But the second bullet point spoke to want to talk to those people who cause harm to others and tell them to go to church. So what I want to do is, when we come back from break, I want to talk to you because you talked about that specific bullet point kind of catapulted you guys or pushed you guys into activism. And let's talk about that, because it could have went a different way. It could have sent you into depression, a lot of anger toward potentially to my spouse, but it took you in another direction. So we come back from break, I want to have you touch on why you went the other way. Why did you all of a sudden go into activism to thwart violence that's going on in the world? We'll be right back. When we come back from break, we'll talk with Pastor Foster again.
Are you ready to buy a new home or refinance a home? Call Quentin Johnson at Homestar Financial. Homestar Financial offers competitive rates for home improvement, new construction, FHA, VA, conventional, and USDA loans. Take advantage of today's low interest rates by being a smart and prepared buyer. Get pre-approved today and find out just how much house you can afford. Call Quentin Johnson at Homestar Financial, 704-526-4007, extension 50306. Homestar Financial makes home ownership a reality. In MLS 161685, equal housing lender.
Hello and welcome to WYTV Channel 7. Today we're here with Pastor Ruett Foster. Ruett Foster, before we went to break, we talked about there was a letter that Evan had written, and bullet point number 2 of that letter, you said kind of pushed you guys into activism. Can you touch a little bit more specifically what it did for you guys, how you took charge and why you took charge in the direction you guys are currently in right now?
Well, the reality is we were just such a close-knit family. We loved each other. We were inseparable. Just we doted over our boys, and we raised them under the admonition of the Lord. So when Evan's life was taken from us, I remember the last day that I saw him. That morning I was leaving for work. And he came to me and he grabbed me around the waist and he said, I'm going to make you so proud. I'm going to make you proud of me, Dad. And I said, Evan, I'm always proud of you. And he said, no, but I'm going to make you really proud of me. And so I kissed him on the forehead, hugged him tight, and I went on, and that was the last time that I saw him alive. He impacted so many people's lives. I mean, as a young child, I used to think, as I was assistant pastor of the church, Community Bible Church, actually, I was assistant pastor of Miracle Life Community Church at that time. That was a different ministry. I used to think that after church, because he'd be in the youth church, he'd be in service with us, and then he would make it to the youth church afterwards, because he would want to stay in the main service and hear the word that the adults were getting, opposed to being in with the youth, especially as he got to be a little bit older. He wanted to be in there. And we would think that he would be in with the youth afterwards, because we would go to the nursery after church and we would find him in there. But we learned later from my pastor at the time that he would stop in the pastor's office and he would talk to the pastor about the messages and what he got that day. And he would tell him, you did a good job, Pastor. And, he would come sit on his lap. He might get a peppermint from him. And he was such a lively person, engaging even as a child. Even when they would be in the market, Rhonda would have him in the market, they're shopping, and he's talking to the elderly person behind him in line, asking them if they know Jesus. It was just really amazing. And we led him through a prayer of salvation. He gave his life to the Lord once he was 3 years old. He was like maybe 3.5, I think. And we didn't think he understood at first, but as he said he wanted this, we realized that he truly did. So his life being taken from us, just the assault that was made on our family, how people around us were impacted. Our story was one of the most public stories around in a very long time. It actually made international news and was across the globe. So many thousands of people were impacted by our story. And we knew that if we were going to go on and live, if we were going to go on and do everything that we believed we were supposed to do, we were going to do these things also in his memory. And so it became, it empowered us. His life, the 7 years that he had here empowered us And we went forward and we began to deal in preschools and in schools and in occupational centers and churches. And every place we had an opportunity to share the love of God through opening up the atrocity that happened in our child being murdered. It was a bittersweet situation, but we really believe that God called us to this type of activism, to this type of sharing of truth, to let people know that you can do the most egregious thing in this earth, take another life, but then there's still an opportunity for change and to receive the love of God and to be a part of the kingdom of God.
Yeah, I think what I was there. I was at the homegoing service for Evan. I vividly remember, as I'm talking right now, that was a standing room only homegoing service. That made international news, and you and I talked. It shook me because I had just moved to California, and I was like, "This is too much for me." Me coming from a small city like Tacoma, Washington, this shook me, and I was like, "I got to go back home. I'm not used to this sort of violence." But to see the strength that you had and the resolve to push forward, you're right. His life may have been taken at 7 years of age, but God said, this is not where his life stops.
Right.
This is not where his story stops.
Mm-mm.
And X amount, decades later, you guys are still marching on and still fighting the good fight. But let me also ask you, because when we did the initial interview, you talked about still having love, obviously love for everyone, but not having obviously hate toward the defendants. But like you said, I want them to do well in their lives. I want good for them to come as well. Talk to us a little bit about how that came to be for you. Because again, like I said, I probably know other people, like, I don't want anything but negativity to happen to those folks that took my child's life. Why is it for you different?
It's different for me because I also know that Charles Baker, the murderer of Evan, he was made in God's image and likeness. God loved him so. God knew he would come forth, and God also knew what he would do. But God wants everyone to come into the knowledge of his saving grace. And so my responsibility is to love. God said, don't judge lest you be judged. And ultimately I felt rage because when we first went to court, he was condescending and arrogant, and he wasn't saying a whole lot, but his body language, prison scrubs hanging down, shrugging, trying to intimidate me with stares. It was horrible. But when we had the opportunity to finally have the rights to give victim impact statements in court, I spent an hour and 20 minutes relating to him and the other defendants and relating in this situation, because we had no rights up until that time. The way the system is set up, we had no rights whatsoever. So I spoke truth and I encouraged him to get his life together, to make a difference on the inside of the prison gates. Even though you're there, and you may be there the rest of your life, you may not be, but make a difference and not allow having killed my son to be in vain. Make what you did, turn it around to help so many other people, to stop them from going down the same pathways. It was a really powerful time, and God has been with us through all of this. He has truly, truly been with us.
Now, you still do a lot of work going into the prisons and ministering to young men and to obviously turning your life over to God, but also, realizing the harm that how they've impacted families. Talk a little bit about some of the conversations that you've had with some of the men you've met in prison, what they're feeling, what they're saying when they're hearing a word from you.
One of the things that's really amazing is I went to a victims impact class at Chino Prison. And when I went that particular day, I think it would have been, if I remember correctly, it was like around Evan's 10th birthday. And it might have been that day, if I remember correctly. But one of the guys who was in that class, which was a required class, which the state now has canceled. They just do a little quick and dirty thing now, opposed to really teaching them about the impact of their actions on victims, making victims and what have you. But one of the guys who had shared a jail cell with Evan's murderer was in that class. And he was so blown away to hear me speak with conviction and truth, and to hear me speak with not hatred, but with hope for Baker's future and the future of others who have committed those kinds of crimes. And as a result of realizing the impact of what Baker had done, who had been his cellmate for an extended period at one of the prisons, he denied himself of being released early. He was going to be released early on good behavior and things he had done, and he did not want to be released early because he was impacted by the truth and the love that I shared that day. We also had an opportunity during Victims' Rights Week one particular year, to speak to Charles Baker's son. His son got arrested as a young adult, and he was sitting front row center, and he heard us tell the story. He never knew who his dad had victimized, and he learned that day with pictures and our story and the love we were showing that we were the family that his dad had hurt. And he broke down, and it was a powerful thing. And his mom told me later that he wants to turn his life around. He wants to help me. Once he's released, I'm not sure if he's even out yet, but I'm going to be checking into that. He wants to make a difference and hopefully be able to give back on some level what his dad took away from us, knowing he could never bring back our son, but was really impacted by what had been done to our family.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting when individuals go into prisons and tell the story about how they were impacted, how it can change the lives of individuals in there. And as you said, it speaks to, again earlier, like we said, even though Evan's life was taken at age 7, God continues to put you in situations to change other people's lives around. That's what we're really called to do. That's what
you just said a key word: changing lives. We have received many awards over the years for the work that we do. But the award that we received that means the most to us is called the Changing Lives Award. And this award was given to us through the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. And we were the inaugural recipients of this award. And this award was not voted on by the prison administration. It was voted on by the inmates. They were asked, and they did surveys, who has impacted you the most over the years since you've been incarcerated? And they said the Fosters have. So we received the Changing Lives Award. And, we tell our story and we seek to really encourage the young people to change in their ways. God has done amazing things as a result of the work we've done. And I've been a runner. I was able to even carry the Olympic torch because of the activism that my wife and I have done in the communities. We took a bittersweet situation and made it a better situation.
Yeah. What's important, every year, you and I text one another this was the day that Evan went home. For the viewers, do 2 things for me. Tell us Evan's date of birth and tell us when Evan went home. There's a reason why I'm going to ask you to do that.
His date of birth is September 22nd. And the day he went home is December 8th.
And the reason I say that is that for us who are listening, those 2 dates are significant to the Fosters. And we're praying a community. And even though they're going through and they're getting through and they will continue to push through, doesn't mean they're not asking for strength, in prayers of strength. So if you remember those 2 dates, when they come along, just say a prayer for the Foster family, and just remember who Evan Foster was, not only to them, but to us. We've gained some insight of who the 7-year-old was and how he impacted the world before he went home to God. Ruett, what I want to do now is, how do the viewers get a hold of you? Because I'm sure there's somebody who is coming through something, or will go through something that your story will be able to help them. So how can they get in contact with you?
Well, I'll give you my cell. My cell is 323-806-7038. And if I'm texted, it's better. But if you leave a message, I'll eventually get to it as well. My email address is ruett.foster@gmail.com. And I also have a Facebook page where you can message me through Facebook. Perhaps at another time, I'll tell you about other ventures and things we're doing. I know that we're close to being out of time, but it's been a privilege. And I just really want to thank you, Byron, for the opportunity. You've been a brother that we've expressed love and support for one another. This is a picture of Byron and Alec after Evan's passing.
Yeah.
And he was there from the very beginning and continues to be there, some 24 years later.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you, Pastor Ruett Foster. I appreciate you as a big brother. I appreciate the work that you not only doing in LA County, throughout the world. This will be seen by people throughout the world. So I hope people, again, reach out to you for encouragement and insight how to make it through. If you'd like to be on Family Matters, you can reach out to me at 704-288-4612, or I can be reached on the website, www.practicalfamilyresolutions.com, or you can email me at practicalfamilyresolutions@gmail.com. Thank you again, Ruett, and the best
You're
of
so
luck to you.
welcome. Thank you.
All right.
My
Take care.
privilege. God bless.